Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome Frank Figliuzzi back, former FBI Assistant Director. You see him on MSNBC and NBC as a national security analyst, author of the book, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. And also we'll touch on the cruise again, that end of June, go on a cruise with Frank. I'm not kidding. It's real. But Frank, let's talk about less fun things and more serious. Look, you've worked for years in law enforcement. Have you ever seen a defendant charged with felonies threatening the prosecutor, the judge's wife, and the judge's daughter? And to be fair, some are threats, some are just calling them out, but we know in the real world what that means. Like the Alvin Bragg picture with Trump, that was a threat. Some of the others are more like, here's the target. Have you ever seen anyone like this charged with crimes before we talk about Trump himself?
So yes, I have. And do you know the circumstances where I've seen it before, including threats to the judge, jurors, and prosecutors and witnesses? Two different sets of cases: drug cartel cases and Italian organized crime cases. I have seen witnesses killed, jurors threatened, jurors paid off, judges and prosecutors followed home and threatened, and only in drug cartel and organized crime cases. So here we are, living out what we've known to be true for a long time, Dean, which is we're looking at essentially a criminal organization.
It's remarkable for you to put that in that kind of context, and that with your experience as an FBI agent for so many years, that's where you've seen it. Now Trump is calling to defund the FBI. Have you ever heard of someone charged with felonies calling to defund the law enforcement agencies that are investigating him right now, specifically the FBI?
Well, you know, I'm sure somewhere in some corrupt municipality in the country in our history, some mayor or town council has threatened to do away with the police chief or the police department because they were looking into something they didn't want to be looked into. But look, this is blatantly obvious to anyone looking at this, which is, yeah, when you investigate me, I suddenly become an enemy of law enforcement, and I'm not a friend anymore to law enforcement. And you can't say you're the party of law and order and justice and then say, we really don't need the premier federal law enforcement agency in the United States. It does not compute. And I think it insults the intelligence of most Americans to think that we could live without the FBI. And look, it gets traction, right? It makes headlines. That's what they do it for. But yet, let's look at the weaponization of government subcommittee, which really should be called the Jim Jordan circus. They have yet to produce the so-called whistleblowers that have any substantive information. Nobody there has been validly deemed a whistleblower by the Department of Justice, by the way. These are disgruntled, fired, and suspended employees who didn't want to do their job. So it's fallen flat on their face, but you'll continue to hear this theme. And for the time being, you'll see it really focused not so much on the feds right now, but of course on Manhattan, where I'm really concerned about the safety of potential jurors, line prosecutors, and the judge's family.
And as you're mentioning that, NBC News reported today that in 24 hours since Trump was arraigned, the presiding judge, Judge Marchand, and his family have received multiple threats. That one official said dozens of threats was the word he used, directed at the judge and his family, and that other sources tell NBC News that the Manhattan DA and other top officials there in his office continue to receive threats. He was already receiving threats. Is this message heard? I mean, any doubt in your mind that Donald Trump wanted this to be the response from some people on his side?
Yeah, there were early reports right after even before the actual indictment was announced, that the strategy from the Trump camp would be, this is from insiders talking to the media, the strategy would be one of doubling down on threats to Alvin Bragg and the entire prosecutive process. So not a surprise, this is the strategy. What's going to challenge the judge and law enforcement here is that even if some miracle occurs and Trump shuts up, if even momentarily, it's clear to me now, Dean, based on the social media posts and rant and rave that's going on from the Trump family and circle, which started with Donald Trump Jr. within seconds of the indictment posting a photo of the judge's daughter
I saw
that the challenge is going to be not so much Trump, because even if he's silenced or a gag order is placed on him, how do you silence the minions? How do you silence the kids? How do you silence this Roger Stones and the Bannons and the Fox News folks and the Marjorie Taylor Greens? This is the problem. They become proxies for Trump, even if he gets hit with a gag order.
And from a legal point of view, because everyone's astounded at this, the idea that Donald Trump could post himself a picture menacingly holding a baseball bat next to the head of Alvin Bragg, and that posting about death and destruction online, and then you have Trump Jr.'s son posting the picture of the daughter. We all want to know, everyone wants to know, when does it cross a line? When can you charge people for any kind of crime in terms of threat, intimidation, impacting the administration of justice?
Wow. Yeah, and they seem, these folks seem to know where the line is and come right up to it. And the problem here is twofold. I'll talk about the criminal statute and the statutory elements to meet a charge of threat or harassment or intimidation. We'll get to that in a second. And those are different statutes, by the way. But this notion of whether or not a state court judge can reach beyond his courtroom and sanction, fine, or otherwise jail or gag, say Donald Trump Jr. or Roger Stone or whoever. And there's a debate going on amongst greater legal minds than mine about the reach of a judge beyond the courtroom. So the people I've talked to in favor of saying the judge has authority to gag somebody like Don Jr. say that, look, it is all part of his courtroom in a sense. It is all part of his case that he is presiding over, and that he could fine and gag people. But you understand the politics of that will be really, really explosive, because it feeds right into the notion that this judge has it in for the Trump family and wants to silence everybody, and where's the freedom of speech and blah, blah, blah. So that's a mess. And then let's talk about even worse politically for appearance's sake on the GOP side. What if he actually formally goes ahead, charges, gags, and even we see arrests happening of people who threaten and harass, which I'm all for, by the way. Well, it feeds into a strategy that Trump, I'm sure, is planning, which is the judge is now biased against me because I have threatened, or my friends have threatened his family. So how could he possibly be objective and preside neutrally over this when I've threatened his kids? So here's what the legal take on that is, and it's precedent, is you can't create your own conflict. So if he's deliberately threatening and intimidating the judge and his family with the strategy of saying you must recuse yourself because I've threatened your kids,
right?
The courts have ruled, hey, that doesn't work.
That's interesting, because you could always pick your judge. Then you'd be picking your own.
You would just keep threatening every judge that you get. So so I say go ahead, and set yourself up where the judge hates you and you can't do anything about it. The problem from a law enforcement perspective is obvious. You will incite, because he's done it before, you will incite some lone lunatic to commit violence. We've seen it over and over again. And I emphasize again, I am very worried about the security of everyone attached to this case.
I'm chatting with Frank Figliuzzi, MSNBC and NBC News national security analyst, former FBI assistant director. I mean, Frank, viscerally, as someone who served in the FBI, when you see Donald Trump acting like the drug kingpins, what's your reaction to this?
It's behavior that should surprise no one. He's acted like this. When you hear Michael Cohen, remember his testimony on the Hill. How do did Trump ever specifically tell you to do this or this? Well, it's a wink and a nod. It's, he adjusts his tie. It's like a Don in a La Cosa Nostra family. And so that's how he's playing this out. No surprise to anyone. My concern is he will become increasingly painted into a corner and desperate as indictment after indictment potentially comes down. Fulton County, Georgia, then perhaps 2 sets of charges from the federal government. And you're going to see a very cornered person, and he's dangerous when cornered. He doesn't like the notion of him, a still photo of him sitting in that Manhattan courtroom looking dejected and not controlling his environment. He hates that. Remember, he filed on that day, arraignment, Tuesday, his lawyer said, hey, we'd like to file a request that he not have to be here for the next hearing. And the judge said, oh no, I like my defendants present. So why did he file that? He doesn't like still photos of himself sitting in front of a judge.
No, and the court sketch artist was even worse. I'm like, you probably want video camera because the stills are bad because you can catch any moment from someone. But the court sketch, I don't know if you saw the sketch artist, it was almost a caricature you would get like in Florida, you're on vacation, but the worst possible thing. He looks awful at it. And you're like, oh, this is, and I don't want to consider that I have any sympathy for him. He just looks awful and that's life. It's never, I don't care what the right says. I don't care what Trump says. When you're charged with 34 felonies, it's not a good day. I don't care how you spin it. It's not a good day.
Well, and by the way, I know we're not getting into the weeds on the 34 felonies, but I love the fact that Bragg went beyond the Stormy Daniels scenario and included a pattern of paying people off who know bad things about him. And the doorman and Karen McDougal in the picture, I think only helps to bolster the case.
I wish they charged him with the New York RICO, which is Enterprise Corruption Act. I guess it didn't rise that level because Mark Pomerantz in his book, the former special counsel in a way analogous to his special counsel, had wrote a whole chapter in his book, People versus Donald Trump, where he thought there was at least an argument to be made there. So be it. That case continues on. In the real world, does it have an impact on Fulton County DA or DOJ that Donald Trump is now charged with indictments to them? I mean, as human beings here, not from a legal point of view.
I'm sure if you're the Fulton County DA and her staff, you're looking at this from the perspective of, hey, this is what we have in our future. And sure, she's continuing to consult with law enforcement in terms of security and threats. There's no better city in the nation to deal with this security challenge than New York City. NYPD, the FBI New York Field Office's Joint Terrorism Task Force, right? They do this kind of thing all the time. The Secret Service. But now move the venue to Fulton County and Atlanta. Yes, of course, a major metropolitan city, but nowhere as sophisticated or rehearsed as NYPD or size-wise, forget it. So this is a challenge. They need to actually go study what NYPD and FBI New York have done, because this is what they are in for. Now, with regard to whether this will have the threats and everything will have a chilling effect on her, I don't think that's who she is. I think she'll go with the case and the facts as she has them.
It's funny, Glenn Kirshner said the opposite, not a chilling effect. He goes, prosecutors were competitive. So we hear that person got, I'm like, now, hey, we got to charge this guy. This is ridiculous. Right. They're beating us. Yeah. And that was Glenn's take. It was very interesting. It was like sort of forget the intimidation. It's more of a motivation.
Well, of course, people who go into the FBI, the prosecutive professions, you're absolutely right. They're type A personalities. And, please tell me I can't do something. Please go ahead. Tell me I can't do it. Yeah.
So you mentioned DOJ case. There was a big development just in the last few days. Mike Pence is not going to appeal the decision that he was trying to prevent himself from testifying in the January 6th investigation with Jack Smith. He's not appealing it. Trump's team might appeal it, but they're going to lose, just like they lost to Mark Meadows swiftly. This is settled law. Say what you want about this right-wing Supreme Court. They've shown every time on these kind of things that they are normal judges and justices. They're not going to help give Trump an exception. They might be horrible on other substantive issues that I care about, but on this stuff. So how meaningful and significant is it that the former vice president of the United States is going to stand before a grand jury and swear an oath and testify about the president that he worked under?
We are now setting precedent and doing, the word unprecedented has probably been used a million times since Tuesday, and we're going to hear it. We're not over with that word. For the legal nerds out there, right? For the legal nerds, we've seen precedent set with Pence. Why? Because for the first time in legal history, we've actually had a ruling that said what a vice president does when he presides over the Senate, those rare times, and particularly for electoral college vote ratification, he is considered a member of that body, and therefore he is protected with regard to the very narrow question of what he did that day and prepared for that day.
Right.
He does have speech and debate clause protection. Very cool if you're a legal nerd like us.
Right.
Okay.
No, I agree. They made that motion, and we laughed at it, and then
Yeah.
the ruling came down. It was very narrow. I mean,
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's
And
fair.
by the way, I get that. I get it, but understand that for everything else, other than the logistics and function of that day, where he, yeah, okay, he's got to talk. And the big thing here is, look, Pence was looking for this. He got what he wanted. He's a guy who wants to have it both ways. He's running for office. He's got to try to pretend that he's with Trump, but not really with Trump. And so this gave him the subpoena to hold up. I tried to fight it, but I'm not taking it all the way. Yeah, I guess I gotta go. They made me go. He wanted that, and he will spill his guts.
And you're so right. He does. Mike Pence is the quintessential want it both ways. While there's some other Republicans, and I don't say this to praise him because they're doing just what should be normal, but Asa Hutchinson or Governor Sununu, who are much more critical of Donald Trump and saying this is ridiculous. So Hutchinson is running. Hutchinson is the first Republican to announce formally who's actually running against Donald Trump. Yeah, Nikki Haley is not running against Donald Trump. If DeSantis announces they're not running against Trump, they're running for whatever they're running for.
Well, Nikki Haley's running for vice president. Is what she's doing.
Right, exactly. But Asa Hutchinson is running against Donald Trump, and that's needed in the GOP. And there was ever a time for conservatives who truly want to reject Trump to form a new party or have some kind of last stand. This might be it. I know you're not a political person, but on a legal end, is it concerning that we don't hear loud voices in the GOP denouncing Trump when he posts a picture of Alvin Bragg and him menacing with a baseball bat? And we don't hear them now denouncing in one voice the idea of Donald Trump Jr.'s, or even at the speech Trump, even if just make it about him at the speech at Mar-a-Lago, bringing up the daughter of the judge. I mean, if they were responsible public servants, shouldn't be going, this is outrageous. There's no place for this.
Yeah, I just yesterday, I thought, where is the sole voice? Give me one or two people from the GOP just saying, hey, it's not cool to threaten somebody's daughter. Just give me somebody. If I missed it, please tell me, but I haven't heard that voice yet, and I don't count on it happening. Look, the golden rule should apply here. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. If you like the fact that your daughter's being threatened, you think it's cool, fine with you, your own daughter, or you can't go out and have dinner somewhere. I mean, I'm not for all that. I don't believe in it. And hey, how about Sarah Huckabee Sanders coming out and saying, hey, I didn't like it when my kids and I were at dinner and I got harassed in a restaurant. How about her coming out and saying, this isn't right with the daughter. Don't make threats about and prosecuted personnel. Don't do that. Haven't heard that voice yet. And it's very disturbing.
In the big picture, when you take a step back, Frank, do you have to pinch yourself on some level that we're having a conversation about the leader of the Republican Party, who's far ahead the leader for the 2024 nomination, a former president of the United States of America, who is acting, as you put it, mimicking at least the behavior of drug bosses and crime figures in what's going on, playing out right in front of us right now?
It's amazed me for the last 5.5 years that I've been doing this. I cannot, it's a surreal experience. I worry about our stature in the world, never mind our own national security risks involved in this. I really think it's eroded us around the world. I'm concerned about the erosion of our institutions, particularly the Department of Justice. And my job is to think worst case scenarios. That's what MSNBC has me do. That's what the FBI had me do. And the worst case scenarios involve things like understanding that, if these federal charges we're all waiting for come down, and a Republican or Trump or other Republican becomes president, they will pardon Trump. He may pardon himself, or Ron DeSantis, if he wins, it may pardon Trump. So when people scream all over, and there's lots of folks doing this on TV, why didn't DOJ, lodge the charges that Alvin Bragg had to lodge in New York? Why isn't, if this was a violation of federal campaign and tax law, this payoff scheme, why didn't we see the feds do it? Well, we didn't see the feds do it because it was a corrupt, it was a corrupt attorney general and at the time. But look at the beauty of our system, Dean. Those state charges, New York, Fulton County, Georgia, they can't be pardoned by any future president. there's a beauty to that.
And you hit on a great point. If Trump gets federal charges, other Republicans will make it an article of faith in the nominate of their running that I will pardon Donald Trump if I'm elected. And that'll just become baked into their running. And I predict that a year ago. People are like, that's nuts. I'm like, nah, look where we are, folks. Now, Asa Hutchinson won't. I don't think former Governor Hutchinson will, but I think some of the others will. Last thing, talking about eroding confidence in the system. We learned today from bombshell reporting by ProPublica that Clarence Thomas has been treated to luxury vacations by a billionaire Republican donor, Harlan Crow. And, trips that are worth about $500,000. And it was never disclosed. And I was looking at a lot of research. Was it illegal or not? It doesn't seem to be. Sheldon Whitehouse, a senator who's really very dogged on the idea of transparency, is like, this is such a outcry to change the law here. But doesn't this chip away at anyone's having confidence in the system where you have a sitting Supreme Court justice going for years on these expensive private jet luxury lots by a guy who's giving money to Republican candidates?
Look, I've not said this before, but our Supreme Court is broken. And my statement has nothing to do with their rulings.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go for another hour on their rulings. That's another question. I'm talking about, when I say broken, they are responsible for their own erosion, for eroding the public trust in their own institution. No one else is more responsible than those Supreme Court justices themselves. And you can start with Chief Justice John Roberts, who, let's call it what it is. When he ran that so-called leak investigation on the Dodd decision that overturned Roe v. Wade and it leaked out, he chose his own U.S. Supreme Court marshal to run that internal investigation. It was a sham investigation. And that's John Roberts. The fact that they still haven't written with Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence, all of her political doings, that he's not ordered a draft of an ethics code for the United States Supreme Court that looks like every other ethics code in every other federal judiciary district and even state districts. They have ethics codes. We don't have one. So every American should read that ProPublica report on the, it's estimated $500,000 in free trips and gifts around the world to Clarence Thomas and his wife, and ask yourself if you think that looks like integrity and ethics from a Republican donor paying for your exotic vacations every goddamn year. That's why I say the Supreme Court is broken, and I place the blame on Chief Justice John Roberts.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's unreal that they don't have an ethics rule and they're not bound by the same rules lower court judges are. And, ethics people today were like, it looks like it might violate a law requiring justices to disclose most gifts. But then you read other articles and it's like, well, there are new rules and maybe it doesn't apply. You should just have set clear rules. You can't do this. And this guy gave money to Ginny Thomas to her Tea Party campaign organization and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know of any case involved that impacted him personally, came before the court. Probably not personally. He's a real estate investment guy, but still politically, and it's.
Well, what I find, if it weren't so gravely serious, it would be hysterically funny when Chief Justice and Roberts and the others go out on the speaking circuit and they talk to, all these the Federalist Society, what have you, and they go, we're so confused. We don't know why the public doesn't believe us anymore. We don't understand. Wake up. This is Exhibit A.
I'm with you. Well, Frank, thanks so much for being on. Read Frank's stuff. He's got a new article on MSNBC. I retweeted it at Dean Obeidallah on Twitter. I always appreciate your time and your insight, my friend. Oh, by the cruise, just last plug on the cruise. Tell us.
Real quick. Time is waning here with regard to the ability to sign up for a high-end luxury cruise. I'm taking all my Twitter followers and everybody else who wants to come and be with like-minded people who are passionate about justice and the rule of law. We're going to kick back, unplug. We will gather a couple times and we'll talk all the issues of the day. Who knows what those issues will be in late June, but we're headed from Seattle to Alaska. Fun excursions, great food, good fellowship. Go to my Twitter account, Frank Figliuzzi 1, or my website, frankfigliuzzi.com, and you can check out the cruise.
Is Clarence Thomas going to be on the cruise?
We will give him a life vest and then we'll hope for the best.
We'll see, the new luxury line, to make up for going with the Republican donor, he's gonna go with Frank Figliuzzi on his thing.
That's right.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks so much for being on.